We are finally live. This is the moment that I always live for, being here with all my brethren during a really hectic and busy time for us all. But it is a very dreary day. It was thundering and lightning before, and I was like, what a better way, what not a way to spend this dreary day, but with some joy and laughter. And we are happy to be here to discuss the truth. And we will get to one comma of your tears. It'll make sense later, but that's what we're going to be talking about today. We are here for the truth. So we have one extra person this time around. If you haven't noticed, we have one music snob in the house with us this time around.
Hi, Arthur.
Yeah.
Arthur, why you look scared?
Listen,
he knows.
I feel, I've been on the opposite end of watching these discussions. I feel like I've leveled up on a video game.
Oh shit!
To be,
We won't hurt you.
Welcome.
We want you.
Awesome. So for those of you, this might be your first time at the rodeo. So I'm going to make some super fast introductions because at any event that I produce, I don't like the reading of the bios. So for those of you who are in Air Meet, Krista has dropped all of the bio links in the Air Meet chat. For those of you who need proper bios, you can find them there. But we're going to get started with Zaire Ali. He is an oral historian. You're not going to start, just in terms of introduction.
Oh, great. I was looking like...
Why you look scared?
There we go.
So we have Zaire in the house, and he's going to bring it like he always does. We have CEO of Glitch. And if you're not using Glitch, you should be using Glitch because it's a fantastic platform. Anil Dash is in the house. And we have my best friend, the author, who just dropped a brand new book on Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah,
if you don't have it, you need to get it. Do you have that? Can we get a promo?
Somewhere.
There we go. Miles Marshall Lewis. And then we also have Elliot H. Powell, who also dropped a book this year, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't it this year?
It was at the end of November of last
year. Okay.
But yes, so I don't have it on me like Miles does, unfortunately. But
yeah, okay. Well,
I'm gonna have
Elliot,
to scurry around.
Yes. It's Sounds of Blackness. Right. Tell us the full title.
Yeah, so it's Sounds from the Other Side, Afro-South Asian Collaborations in Black Popular Music, published by the University of Minnesota Press.
Yes, because Elliot is a professor at the University of Minnesota, and he is currently in Minneapolis. He says it's about the snow. So we are. All right, and last but not least, my name is D'Angela Duff, also known as Polished Solid. You'll probably hear a lot of wind because it's kind of crazy over where I am in Jersey City. That's where I roll right now, and it's whipping. So the time is going to really go by, as you know, and I am going to mix it up a little bit, but I do want to get back to my standard questions, which I love. I know some people hate them, but actually the first question that I want to get started with is, why is the truth important to Prince's canon? So Zaire, he gave me don't you dare start with me. So who wants to take that lead? Why is the truth important in Prince's canon?
Shoot, I'll jump in if nobody wants to. Because it is the truth. This is where he changed his emotional relationship to his fans. This was an evolution, and I think of a piece with emancipation, of a piece with that moment in his life, of fatherhood, all the other things he embraced, and of course the reckoning with the record label that had been sort of reaching its climax at that moment. But, Prince came straight at sort of going around his public persona for the first time and telling us where he was at. We have, I think, his most vulnerable moment on record here, and we have the furthest from pop distribution you could possibly have. I bundled it in with a crowdfunded record on a website you got to find on I hid it in a treasure chest, right? This is as obscure as it gets, as opposed to having a contest on MTV that he's going to come to your town and play you a concert, right? Like this is the 10 years after the sort of peak. I want to be a pop artist and accommodate you. This is I literally do not care if you play me on the radio, but I have something I got to say. And I think that's a turning point in his life. I think it's an openness and honesty that he dabbled in, but had been reticent to make the centerpiece of what he was doing. And I think the songwriting, I mean, let's not forget the playing, the songcraft, the songwriting. This is certainly by the 90s, one of the first times he'd gone back to like produced, arranged, composed, and performed by on a lot of songs where it's top to bottom him. Every sound you hear is him and his doves. I think that's just an extraordinary thing. So I think it's such an important record in his career, and unlike anything he had done before, but really sets the stage for probably the best moments of the rest of his career.
Yes,
I mean,
I feel like I can. Oh, go ahead. Oh,
No, I was just chime in. I don't have all that much to say, but piggybacking on Anil, I feel like it's a very personal record. It's probably one of my. I guess it's my favorite 90s Prince record. I mean, it's between this and The Gold Experience and Emancipation, but this is sort of always been my favorite. On Emancipation, he has like his baby's heartbeat on one of the tracks. And another one of the songs is something that he composed especially for the wedding that he and Maite had. And this album is the very next record, which sort of has the last track, Comeback, which is explaining, a little bit about spirits leaving and if they'll come back if you like say their name or don't say they're dead. And of course, that's a reference to Amir, his child that he lost after 6 days of being alive. And so, and then he never mentioned the wedding or his child again on Wax, after this. So it's extremely personal. And I have a soft spot for Prince records, Prince lyrics that really show him grappling with things that are going on in his real life. He has a tendency to sort of not be personal in that way very often. So, and then, the songcraft, of course, is just impeccable to me. It took place, the album was dropped during the era in the 90s when Unplugged on MTV was like huge, and MTV was doing huge numbers with Nirvana Unplugged after the death of Kurt Cobain. And so this could easily have been sort of like an Unplugged album where it was Prince's way of doing it. And it's a lovely record. I mean, what can I say?
Yeah, I think for all of the things that everyone said, for many albums and for many years, Prince had promised or had wished and prayed, may we live to see the dawn. And this was the album where he had an acoustic version, but he actually welcomed us to the dawn. So we got, at least lyrically and conceptually, a little bit of what he was thinking about that. I mean, to have sort of promised or predicted or foretold of the dawn for so many projects, and then to say, I feel comfortable saying, welcome to the dawn, I think does signal how important this project was to Prince. I agree, the songwriting, and I know we'll get more into it, the lyrics were just incredibly sophisticated. And I also think that the format allowed Prince to really lean into his blues, in the blues tradition, more than I think anything that he had done before. I mean, we had gotten, he had circulated The Ride, which was his, at least recorded blues. We knew he had done some blues in some of his live shows, but, this is some straight up blues in several of these tracks. And so I think, this is significant. The other thing, this is, I do feel like, Prince had made references, of course, to in the 90s to the ways that race had played out, not only in the United States, but in terms of his own life and his own professional life. And it's clear, and I know we'll talk about this, but there are several places on this album where he self-references as a Black man, just to be very clear. And I think that that's also important.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll just follow up. I don't know if there's much more on my end to kind of say beyond just we've talked about how personal it is, and it's also deeply intimate, right? And not obvious, not intimate in the sense of sex and sexuality, although that's obviously there on a couple of tracks, but just the kind of way that the acoustic guitar allows for a closeness with the listener, right? And we know that as Prince fam, right, the kind of communication that Prince can give us with his lyrics, with the kind of sort of lyricism here, it's bringing us even closer, right? So if Love Sexy is if Love Sexy on the front cover, right, this nude Prince bearing his soul, there's a way in which the truth becomes a kind of evolution of that as well. I also, I'm going to mention something that Rose Zahir brought up about this album showcasing how in tune Prince is with the blues, right? And I think another thing that ends up happening is we all know, hopefully, the kind of musical archivist that Prince is. There's something really telling to me about this particular album, how Prince is also showcasing different sets of musical traditions through the guitar, right? So obviously we hear the blues, we hear on something like Fascination, right? A more kind of flamenco kind of gesture, but also for me, I don't want to jump ahead, but I'll say one of the more interesting songs for me on the album is actually Dion, because for me, how much it sounds like a kind of Smokey Robinson and the Miracles kind of influence there, right? So you have these kinds of showcasing of these various kinds of these kind of sort of musical kinds of traditions through the guitar. So Prince is kind of taking us through a kind of musical journey or genealogy through guitar. And so I'll stop there and actually sort of kick it to Arthur. Not to put Arthur on the spot, but here we are.
You need to unmute yourself, Arthur. You're muted.
The thing that because I was throwing all kind of shades, so I'm glad I muted myself. The thing that makes it most unique for me, and why I would recommend it, that out of all of Prince's albums, this one is very, very singular in that he has not showcased in quotes an acoustic type of album. The album, it's very quiet, and I feel like it's almost like an intermission between what came before the classic 80s period, the 90s period, where his arrangements became very grand. He had just released a 3 CD, just treasure trove, of music, post breaking his contractual relationship with Warner Brothers, and now we have something that is very, very quiet, very focused. And to dovetail off of what Anil was talking about, how the album was distributed, it was almost like the Crystal Ball set was like a mule to communicate this album, or to get this album into the hands of, his fans. And he knows that they're his fans because what's important to somebody is always found in what they, among other things, what they spend their money on. And this was not an inexpensive set for its time, the 3 CD Crystal Ball set. And with if I remember correctly, there were a lot of problems in delivering the CD set. So as a bonus, he included the Kama Sutra in those initial orders. And now I bought the first retail batch, so I do have the circular clear package, and it does come with the truth in it. And as excited as I was about having a lot of that material that I had on bootlegs with, crazy sounding audio and scratchy, third generation transfers. When I first heard the truth, it's like truth, stuff I've already heard but sounds better. The truth, kind of threw that around and really got into what he was talking about in the truth, because he was, communicating, a lot of feelings. And each song isn't necessarily autobiographical. But that being said, he got a lot of stuff off of his chest. Mm-hmm. And moving after the truth, we go into NPG album, and then we get into Rave, and then we get into his fourth act, where he takes the victory lap with musicology. And just to close, it was when I came to that album, it was a really interesting time in my life. I was kind of rebuilding off of a very, very serious illness in 1996 and going into 97. And the truth was almost like, talking with a friend, someone who I felt I'd known all my life but never actually met, and we're kind of having this conversation. I had my first apartment, I'm doing my own things, solo. And it was like, it was just a good companion piece for me, after Emancipation had kind of gotten me through some of that difficulty. Along with Ghostface Killah's Iron Man, excellent album too, but that's not what we're talking about. But those two albums, kind of got me through this very difficult period. And as Prince was kind of taking a deep breath and exhaling, I was kind of doing that same thing. So it's a real personal album for me.
So similar to Arthur, as most of you who've attended these events know, I entered Prince through the music. So I was super excited that this was an acoustic album, because for me, you can really tell if someone can really play the guitar, if they can master the acoustic guitar. And the mastery that Prince showed on this album is really incredible. It also, as others have already stated, just showcases how good of a songwriter he is when he can just take a guitar and his voice, and it rivals any other songs that are multi-track up the wazoo with layers and layers, of instrumentation. So I was really super excited about this. And I listened to this, like you, Arthur, more than I listened to Crystal Ball, like when I got it in real time. I'm going to give shout outs to Tariq, whose birthday is today. And he's choosing to spend it with us today. And in the chat over at AirMeet, he wants to know who's still waiting for their copy from 1998 of Crystal Ball. I just thought that was hilarious. I'm sure some of us are still waiting, but I thought that was super, super funny. Okay, so Miles, this is for you. We're going to get this started. And again, I know Arthur doesn't like this, but I don't care. So we're going to get started with our original questioning, which is, what is your most favorite track on the album? And what is your least favorite track on the album?
Oh, word.
And we're going to get started with Miles Marshall Lewis. Kick it off, because I can't wait.
Yeah. So
he has to put his glasses on.
He got notes.
Yeah, I'm like, now
he's got notes.
I mean, all right. So, the song that I really sort of love to just hear over and over again, actually, is "Man in a Uniform." Because it's got that like, it's just, he attacks that. And then you've got the those whistles in the background from the French Réveillé, like, that's fresh. So much of this album is dope. I mean, of course, I love Dion. Dion is sort of an easy one to be like, well, Dion's my favorite. There's nothing to dislike about Dion. There's really, in my opinion, there's really nothing to dislike about anything on here. I just love the record. You could say, okay, maybe Animal Kingdom is the weakest track or whatever, but I don't really feel that way. I actually was an impressionable college student and 20-something, and I went through like maybe 15 years of, what do you want to call it, pescatarianism, because Lenny Kravitz was like on, and Lisa Bonet were on TV all the time talking about, well, I'm a vegetarian, and Prince eventually, and Madonna eventually, and me feeling like, well, I'm on that wavelength too, so I'm going to sort of leave meat alone, and, and I was in college, so like vegetarian or pescatarianism for me meant like going to get filet of fish at McDonald's instead of, instead of whatever I would have ordered, what I'm saying? But I was trying my best, right? And within my budget. So Animal Kingdom, you know, at the time that the truth came out, yeah, I was only eating fish and not chicken and not beef and all of that. And I was glad that he had sort of represented that side of things on the record. But I'm looking at the track listing and I'm like, yo, what do I... You know, The Other Side of the Pillow is another personal favorite. It's hard to pick one favorite. The whole record is just... And I hadn't felt that way about Prince in so long when this came out, to be honest, that I could just play the whole thing all the way through and feel like, yo, let's just play it again. Let's just play it all day. Let's just play it all week. Like, this is the shit. This, you know, I really wish it had been his 21st album for real. I guess something that hadn't been mentioned yet is that EMI had scheduled this as his next release after Emancipation, then EMI folded. And so it got stuck into this compilation thing with Crystal Ball after that. But had EMI had no financial problems, like, it just would have been his 21st record. And I wonder what kind of videos would have been produced, and I wonder what kind of radio airplay would have existed, and what kind of critical accolades he could have gotten if it had really been able to like stand on its own two legs as like a full-fledged record. But yeah, I just no spitballs this time. I just love this record.
I don't even... Miles, are you there? Is that you? Is there someone else? Because I know I'm shocked. I'm shocked.
There's a first for everything. That was beautiful, Miles. I can't believe it. I'm so astonished.
D'Angela's messed up.
Silence.
Wait.
Pin drop.
Yes, but I will say, I think it's a perfect album, with the exception of the very, very last song. Zaire has already sort of spoken to this a little bit, but I probably have a different twist. I was just so disappointed with Welcome to the Dawn. I was waiting for this song. I was like, he's going to do this, like, May You Live to See the Dawn, some kind of Dawn song. And then this is what we got. I was like, oh no. But other than that, I absolutely love the record. In Real Time, Don't Play Me was a favorite of mine. And Dion was also a favorite of mine, because I was really into Dion Ferris, and also...
You weren't alone.
Yeah. Into our music.
Yeah, so was Prince.
Okay.
I didn't mean to take it there. But, and revisiting the album for this event, the song that really stands out for me now as an older person is Third Eye. I just love that. Is my favorite song. And it just talks about, taking responsibility for your own life, and the words are just so pertinent. And I was like, how did I miss this the first time? And the song that I was in love with then, and I still in love with, is Fascination. I mean, like, it just... If you're in a bad mood, you can get into a good mood super quick if you put on Fascination. You just cannot not move with that song. It's so beautiful. Rhonda Smith's bass playing is out of this world. So when I think of The Truth, the first song I actually think about is Fascination, because I just love it so much. But because it's layered meaning with instruments, I feel like it doesn't belong on The Truth. Right. So I sort of separate it as sort of its own thing, separate from The Truth. So that's the reason why I didn't really come up as my favorite song, but it would probably be the favorite song, but I don't really connect it with The Truth in that way. What about you, Zaire?
I'm so glad you mentioned Third Eye, because there is that line, and I'm going to butcher it, but the writing on this song, where he says, in between Adam's thighs, the serpent appears and tries to place upon Eve and nectar. That is like, we talk about the blues, and the blues is like, this sort of crossroads between the sacred and the profane. And we know that this is something that Prince, just epitomized and was just excelled at throughout his whole thing. But this is really, that song is at the crossroads, because as you said, it's about salvation. It uses biblical, I have never heard a reimagining of the story of Adam and Eve with such creativity and such sensuality. It's really that line alone is so beautifully poetic. And also, like, as even a young adult listening to this, I felt like, ooh, I heard something I wasn't supposed to hear. But so third eye for me. I mean, as everyone said, that, you know, like I love Don't Play Me, because I love the play as all of the meanings of play, you know, of exploitation, of actual play, of you know, and the whole "I've seen the mountaintop, it ain't what you say," you know, that, and you know, there's one read of "Don't Play Me" which can be, you know, a little bit of respectability politics, because he's like, you know, I'm over 30 and I don't smoke weed, I speak proper English, and I'm straight. But I didn't hear it that way. What I heard from that song is Prince offering to continue to expand our notion of what Blackness is, right? Because he goes on to say, like, oh, how you think all of us all look the same, are the same. You know, I'm the wrong color and I play guitar. I mean, this goes back to when he first started in his career, and he said to Warner Brothers, don't market me as a Black artist. And many people interpreted that as saying Prince didn't want to be Black. But what he was really intending was, I don't want your version of Blackness, because your Warner Brothers version of Blackness, your record company version of Blackness is so narrow, it's so exclusive, exclusionary, that you don't even allow for space for somebody like me. Right. And I felt like, of course, the whole song is about, in part, his critique of the industry and of the airwaves and of media. But, you know, in that he just, you know, he's like, yo, we have you know, like the Walt Whitman, I contain multitudes of Blackness. And so don't play me, right? Don't play me, and don't play me. And so that will always be my favorite. I think my least favorite is Animal Kingdom, you know, and it's, you know, it's not even because of the somewhat corniness of it. But I wasn't a fan of the songs that had too much electronic instrumentation, because I felt like I wanted to hear an acoustic record, and I really want to hear acoustic record, because I like Circle of Amour is another one of the real erotic songs, but there's too much synthesizer and stuff going on in that, and I'm just like, you know, this breaks the mood of the album for me. So those are my takes.
Arthur, Anil, or Elliot? Elliot, I felt like you were about to speak.
Yeah. I also. So I'll start with my favorite. And I don't even know how to preface. I think that hell has frozen over, because Miles and I share a favorite in Man in Uniform. That is.
Oh yeah.
That is actually that's my favorite. And we've been doing this for how many years now, and Miles and I never see eye to eye, and I don't know what else to say. But no, I mean, it's you know, I continue to say this, right? Like, my favorite Prince is the kind of funky, edgy Prince, right? And we get that in that song, right? So the kind of kind of role playing, right? Kind of activities, right? There's the tongue line, right? So there are things that I'm like, yep, this is great. Bottle this, right? Bottle this, and so it's my favorite there. My least favorite is really Animal Kingdom. I'm definitely with you here on this one. There's too much going on. And so we have it's not that acoustic. Also, the sound effects are just, it's too much. It's too much for me. And I'm like, I can't like the dolphin noise. I don't.
Yeah, the dolphin was a little.
I was like, what is happening here? Like, we need
was Miles. That was your fish sandwich. See, you was
I kind of like Animal Kingdom.
Right.
The funky blue cheese part, that's like, I like feel that. I like when he gets to that part in it. That's not my favorite though, but
it doesn't. Yeah, I was like, what's and I mean, I mean, it ruins it for me. And this is the last thing I'll say about that. And is that right? That's the first song on the second side, right? We get 6 on side A, and then we flip it over, Animal Kingdom, and it's just like that. For me, ruins that second because I was like, no. So like I kind of so I'm like, look, we can just kind of zip through this one and just get over to the next song. So that's kind of how I feel about that. Like I think the first side A is perfect, right? And I think it's nicely sequenced. And then we flip it over, and then it's like, oh no. So that's my feel. It messes with the flow for me as well.
And now Arthur.
I mean, I think "Don't Play Me" is one of the most important songs in his whole career. I think he had spent at that point nearly 40 years trying to get played on the radio, trying to be a voice in all our heads, right? And to really walk away. And I think at a moment of loss, at a moment of reckoning, to be like, what I really care about. And, you know, really months after he'd said, I've been to the mountaintop and it ain't what you say, or months before, and he'd said, all that glitters in gold. Right, he's having this moment, which is like, I was chasing a thing I didn't actually want. And, you know, I remember there was a moment around this, but well, part of it I think about with Fascination, where he's also taking shots at Michael Jackson, right? Where he's like, there's nothing there for you. And you can keep chasing this dream, and one, it's not for us, and two, it's not real, and it'll destroy you. Right. You know what I mean? And I think that's such a profound, I mean, very few people have that revelation in their lives on a personal level, let alone on a global stage, right? So I think that's really, really extraordinary. There's a version in one of the first celebrations, might have been '02, where he did an acoustic set for the first time with the guitar. And, you know, he does Don't Play Me, and he does The Truth, and he's sort of telling stories. These have become sort of part of my read on this whole album, is because I think he told a little bit more about what he meant by it, because he brought people into Paisley Park for the first time, and then he played the songs like he recorded them, probably a couple feet from where he did record them. And, you know, on Don't Play Me, he's talking about, you know, I got to be the curtain puller. You know, like, I know you've seen The Wizard of Oz, and I got to be the curtain puller and tell the truth. And it was really, that was on The Truth, but sorry, on Don't Play Me, you know, he's still talking about the, you know, the industry. And I think there's this part of just like, he's being honest in a way that, again, like he hadn't done Unfettered. I think the other part, so Don't Play Me is my favorite, you know, by far. I think The Truth is right up there. I think it's also, I mean, it's in dialogue with everything from Robert Johnson, who he'd wanted to do a biopic of just a few years prior. I mean, that wasn't that long before, but was obviously on his mind. Obviously, from just down the road, honestly, from where his father was from, like that's clearly his grounding. But also, Tracy Chapman, 5 minutes before, had the biggest hit of her career with doing a song that he is clearly influenced by. I mean, you know, the blues is the blues, but like, you can't not hear that with you know, Give Me One Reason. And that's beautiful. I mean, I think that's just this, like, he's like, I am the recapitulation of these centuries of black music, and I'm gonna, you know, make that the anchor to this experience. And also, like, what he says explicitly in Don't Play Me, but also implicitly in the whole record is, you know, this is black music, and that was something that I think Tracy Chapman had done such an effective job of reclaiming. And I think it's hard to, you know, it's easy to forget in the context of where we are now with, you know, decades removed. But I think in that moment, that was a radical thing that she did, and that she got so much accolades and attention for it. And I think he's sort of, you know, very much in dialogue with that. Third Eye, for me personally, I didn't love the music, but I had been really intrigued. You know, you look at the liner notes for Emancipation, and he's got, you know, a third eye, a dot on his head. This obviously, you know, being raised in the Hindu faith, this was the first time he'd had any serious dialogue with imagery and messages from Hinduism. And, you know, I have a lot of misgivings about some of this stuff, but like, it was a really, I mean, to embrace vegetarianism and veganism at the same time as you're explicitly talking about, you know, a Hindu iconography, that was interesting, because a lot of the stuff I'd struggled with most in the sort of first, in the 80s, I'd say, with his work was, you know, the overt Christianity of it. Like, I knew it was sincere for him, but also was, if you're not in that faith, you're like, I don't even know what you're referencing sometimes, or I don't, you know, like, and it's not, you know, I think it's sincere, but it's not of me. And so this was a really, at a personal level, he was going like all in on stuff that I'd grown up in.
Right.
And so I thought that was a really extraordinary thing. And to do at a time of loss, to do in you know, I think the emotional heart of this album has come back. Right. And it has a lot of personal resonance for me for a lot of reasons. But he is explicitly talking about a theme of reincarnation. I mean, he really is. This is not a Christian song in any conventional way. You know, it definitely references some of those, you know, touch points, of course, because that's his faith and that's what he was part of. But I think the way it talks about death is not a conventional Christian narrative at all, and it is much more, I think, in dialogue with a lot of Eastern faiths. But what I see is like he had been dabbling and learning from, you know, some parts of Hinduism and Dharmic religion. So that was like pretty extraordinary, and it was a thing I never in a million years thought he would do. Like it was just such a surprise. And then of course like Animal Kingdom. Honestly, at the time it was like cringe-inducing. It was one of those rare things. Yeah, I mean he did a little bit of this in the '90s, but I was just like, man, really? But the funky blue cheese thing, like it stuck with me over time.
It's funky, right?
It's funky, and you know what the truth of it is now. The way I feel now is I'm like, he was doing his own shit. Like he was on his purely self-indulgent, the most unapologetically. This could never be a hit anywhere in the world.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, I love you for that. I love like you are feeling this 1,000%. You want everybody to know it. You know they're not going to go with you. Like, you know, the dolphin sounds like people are going to be like, really now? Like, that's what we're doing? And that was the thing I loved. Like, I mean, when he went full Prince, right, where people are like, there is nobody else in the world who could do this. Nobody else that could record this. Nobody's going to say this. I'm like, how do you not respect that? I think that's something you got to love. Conversely, something I think actually one of my weaker songs of the album, even though it's a good song, is The Other Side of the Pillow. I think it's, you know, he performed it a lot, and it got kind of more and more lounge singer the more he did it.
Right.
And so I think it put me off on it because I was just like, it's a clever lyric, right? Like, but it was also like, some, you know, that's like your uncle talking, right? Like it's a little bit kind of corny, like the more he did it. And so that kind of lost me over time. But I mean, this is such a great album. It's hard to pick anything I don't like. On Dion, I love the begging. I do think that the Smokey Robinson reference is dead on. I think it's like, this is a begging song, and he hadn't actually done that many. And that's not like he did Seductive,
right?
But he didn't do like come on back. You know, I think that's such a great song. Anyway, I really think like we can't underemphasize how much that 1-2 of the singles, you know, The Truth and Don't Play Me, were unprecedented in his career and changed things.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with so much with both what both Zaire and Anil said. I won't belabor it too much, but Don't Play Me was, and forever will be my favorite song off of The Truth, and truly one of my favorite Prince songs. He's so self-aware on that song. He hits so many touch points, you know. I'm over 30. He's acknowledging, you know, his ageism. Granted, he's almost 40, but it works better with the lyrics, with the rhyming scheme. You know, I put my ass away, meaning, hey, I know what I did in 1991.
Right.
You know, and I was like, yes, it's like a vindication for everybody that took all this hell because I was a fan of yours and you actually did that. You know, and he's talking about his own maturity. He's talking about the fact that for all the teasing and shade that he got for writing Slave on his face, for all the pushback he got for blowing up his, you know, his whatever glorious deal that he had with Warner Brothers, you know, he left and, you know, changed his name. And I mean, you know, what really pissed him off was the fact that Warner Brothers trademarked the Prince.
Right.
And now, you know, he completely shapeshifts, moves away. And you know, you really can't tell me anything. Like you can't tell me that you have an excuse. I did this, you can do this too, you know. So the idea of him saying about, you know, you couldn't play enough of me now to make me feel like a star. Don't play me, I already do in my car. That is the most flex lyric that he's ever said. That one lyric kills the sum total of the song My Name is Prince. I don't need you. I got it, and I got this, and it's. I have to think about, even in real time, you know, I have to think about where we were, where R&B with pop in parenthesis was at that time. You know, we're a year if that, off of Baduism. We're 2 years from voodoo. And we're kind of in this period where, going back to what I was saying about how, this album was like transmitted through this crystal ball set, we can imagine that a lot of the Soulquarians were listening to this music, were checking for Prince along this time,
Oh, we know they were.
Right.
And,
I would say that Baduism dropped February of '97, I believe.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. And he's influencing what's coming ahead that completely transforms R&B. And that's pretty significant. And I think this is kind of the part where I'm kind of going to go out on a limb, because obviously I don't have any like real, facts and basis for this, but it just feels like this was kind of the period where he kind of begins to accept his elder stature in this. That really manifests as we get closer to certainly One Night Alone, but absolutely through musicology and going beyond, where he now begins to mentor these same people, that are responding to his career that, some could argue he was responding to, to them from time to time, but that's a different conversation. But Don't Play Me, yeah, absolutely. And Comeback is an absolutely beautiful, 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 gorgeous song. Yeah. And I do agree with D'Angela, not so much that, if this was your position, that Welcome to the Dawn shouldn't have been on the album, but Comeback is a much better closer to the album. Like,
100%.
I was good.
Right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so like I'm happy that you mentioned Comeback. So some of you know that my best friend, I met him when I was 17. I actually met him at the Love Sexy concert, and I don't have my Love Sexy button, so you're gonna have to go Love Sexy because I don't have it, because I had to change this. But anyway, I asked Arthur, like what would be a song I could play at his funeral, and Arthur recommended Comeback, and I listened to it, and I was like, yeah, he would like this song. And I don't really think too much about it because I had never really listened to Comeback. Because again, I told you the songs that I kind of gravitated towards, and for me it was like a little saccharine, but when it was performed, when it was played at the funeral, it was so perfect. And now, it's like I get the song, and it wasn't sad for me. It was just so beautiful. It was just like really beautiful, and I felt like it reflected my friend's just essence of just being really beautiful. So thank you for that, Arthur. And I was like kind of surprised that no one else had mentioned it up until this point, but you came through, Arthur, with that. So we have some time. So I actually wanted to talk about the re-release, the vinyl only record store day. There were 12,000 copies that were ushered into the world. There actually are still a lot of copies out there, and I was a little disappointed in that because there has to be 12,000 buying Prince fans in the entire world that could have made this like get out of print with the quickness. But that didn't happen. So, and also, thank you. Let's do it. Yeah. So I want to talk about this release. Why do you think that this is just like, I consider it a lost album, even though it's not lost. It was officially released. It's been officially re-released. Like, why do people don't want to talk about this album or, give it its due? It rarely comes up, on social media. I don't understand. So that's one question. And the other question is, we want to talk about like this cover because it was a little different than, previous incarnations and stuff like that. But I really want to start off like, what is it about the truth where some Prince fans just they don't seem to gravitate towards it, and I don't understand it.
I don't know. I don't have terribly much to say about that. That hasn't been my experience. To me, like I did a big piece, I guess, in Wax Poetics, right, about Madhouse many years ago. And one of the things I said in there was that, like, just the word Madhouse was sort of like a secret password, amongst Prince fans during a certain phase of things, in terms of like, oh, okay, so if you up on Madhouse, then you're the real Prince fan that I can talk to about all this minutia, you know? And I think that the Truth has that sort of same reputation, you know, that like if you can vibe with somebody about how fantastic the Truth is, then you know that they're like, you know, their Prince knowledge is like in degree level or whatever. In terms of the album cover, I never saw the cassette. I mean, I understand that it's sort of, when the cassette came out way back in the 90s of Don't Play Me backed with something else. I didn't have one. I don't even remember what it was. But that was like sort of the image on there. And I don't know that it would have been the official album cover or not. Probably not. But I guess they just expanded on that and ran with that with the re-release, which, you know, like, why not? I guess what else do you have to go on? But yeah, what else about the re-release aside from the comma, which we'll get to?
That photo was on the cassette single for The Truth, backed with Don't Play Me, which was on 1-800-FUNK. You could call and get it.
Right.
It was the only. We didn't even know if the album was ever going to come out. Like, there was so much chaos around, you know, Emancipation and the other
I mean, I bought
stuff.
my crystal ball at Best Buy, and I remember this was sort of when my career was first taking off just as a music journalist, and so I was always used to getting everything free from the record company. I was kind of high on that, whatever. And I had to actually go to the store and spend like $50 on this Prince album because I had no publicist to call and just be like, yeah, shoot me that shit, you know, like the month before it came out, so I could flex in my car with it. Like, no, I had to be online with everybody else to buy it, and I bought the round one. And I didn't order it, and I remember even the internet was not bubbling the way it is now. Obviously, nobody had broadband and all of that, but there were still internet complaints from various places about how long it was taking to come from the official source ordering it. And I foregoed the Kama Sutra bonus just to be able to go to the store and get it and take it home and listen to it immediately, you know.
Well, we don't want to run out of time. We got to talk about this comma.
No, we don't.
We really
That's
don't.
no law. There's no.
I think the only thing that we have to do is have Miles explain why we are talking about a comma, because everyone's like, "Why? I don't know why we're talking about a comma. What is it? What comma? What comma exists?" So go ahead, Miles.
Go ahead,
It's
Miles.
no biggie, you know what I'm saying? I would kind of rather y'all just figure it out, but I'll explain it. So, One of Your Tears, right? The song One of Your Tears, it has a comma in the re-release. So if you look, I mean, it's 3 different places, as if it's actually really official. It's on the back here, it's on the actual vinyl, it's in the lyric sheet that comes in here. It's as if it's the song is 1, of your tears. But that was never initially intended. I mean, it wasn't on the CD. So I don't know what kind of glitch they found, or they got introduced at some point. Who knows? You know, who knows? Somebody knows. Maybe they found Prince's handwritten lyrics in the vault, and actually he put a comma, and then they just inserted it the way it was always intended. Who knows?
I just want to reflect the original digital liner notes for the Crystal Ball record. They're online. You can look them up. There's no comma.
Right.
The original CD sleeve that was, so the way that the mail order version of the album came is they did have the plastic case for the 3 CDs from Crystal Ball. They had the paper sleeve for The Truth and for Kama Sutra, kind of like the other stuff they do, that little digipack. And you open it up, and it didn't have a comma on it. So, comma, not real. That's it. That's some George Lucas. We added it back in. Comma shot first. I don't buy any of that.
Okay, Neil. We'll transition the conversation. Let's talk about some of the music. Go ahead, Miles.
I think I'm a firm believer in the Kama Sutra.
All right.
Unsubscribe. That's not.
Get a little water on that one.
Has this got a block? You got a block button on this thing?
All right, sorry.
There we go.
Oh my God.
I didn't say that.
Sorry.
All right, I'm going to get my composure back. Okay, so one of the things that I love about this album is Rhonda Smith's bass playing. And Rhonda Smith is not only on Fascination, but she's also on Third Eye. She's also on Animal Kingdom. She's also on One of Your Tears. So it was something interesting about The Truth. Normally, when I got a Prince record, the first thing I would do was look at the liner notes. But for some reason, I was so transfixed by the truth for a very long time. I just thought Fascination was the song where all the players were on. And I really didn't understand that some phenomenal bass playing was being done by Rhonda all over the record. And it really transforms Prince's songs, similar to me that Tal did with Welcome to America. Like some of that bass playing on Welcome to America is just something that Prince himself would not do. Like it has like a different tone, and it really just gives a different perspective on a Prince song in terms of the musicianship. And I often wonder, kind of like Heat is one of my favorite films. And I often wonder what it would be like if Al Pacino and Robert De Niro switch roles, you know, like how would that translate? And then like with some of these like really iconic songs on The Truth in terms of the bass playing, I wonder how they would feel if Prince was playing the bass. So I'm curious that if you guys also reveled in Rhonda's bass playing.
Yeah.
I think Rhonda's I think Rhonda Smith's bass playing, particularly her fretless bass playing, is a gift. The fact that you're able to hear her voice on a Prince record. You know, it's not the first time that he's recorded other musicians on his music. He was doing that all the way back to the Revolution, you know. Right. But I mean, on a Revolution record, I couldn't tell the difference between if the whole Revolution played on America or if they didn't on Pop Life. You just don't get that. But you know, here you kind of get that distinction of who's really playing. And I think that was an extension from what he was doing earlier in the decade, particularly like with Michael Bland's drumming. Right. You know, you began to get the distinct characterizations of style there. You know, some of her, and I have to preface this by saying, you know, I don't mean to make a one-to-one comparison. Sometimes I can kind of be a little lofty with how I make my analogies, you know. But and the same kind of feel that I would get from listening to Joni Mitchell's Hajira, and I hear Jaco Pastorius's fretless playing. It just adds a whole nother dimension to the music. And I have that same type of feeling when I hear Rhonda and Prince, and also her playing on Emancipation. It was just absolutely gorgeous.
She also has co-write credit on Animal Kingdom and one of the other songs. I think it's Man in Uniform, which I didn't even hear her on, but she's there. But she has music co-write. Like he wasn't actually in this era that generous with.
Right.
So
I would read something.
Yeah,
sorry, from
of course.
As long as nobody else had anything to say. This comes from the Prince Vault, which is something that we should just mention.
Yes.
The credits on the 2021 re-release wrongly lists John Blackwell, Rhonda Smith, Renato Neto, Najee, and Greg Boyer as additional musicians on Other Side of the Pillow. The version on The Truth is a solo performance by Prince, Blackwell, Smith, Neto, Najee, and Boyer. Oh no, what they're trying to say is that these credits belong on One Night Alone, not on the re-release. Yeah.
So we know
throwing that out there.
We know the re-release has inaccuracies like the comma.
Right.
Right.
Stepped into that one.
For sure.
Stepped into that one.
Well, you know, if I could go back to a little bit about when you were talking about D'Angelo, why you know, The Truth isn't, you know, just an instant sellout and highly regarded in that way. It could be that there's no myth attached to it, you know, given that with the way that the estate has begun to handle these reissues, I think they've gotten a lot better. I really think that The Truth being released on Record Store Day was their smartest play.
Because this wasn't going to get a big splash of like the classic album is finally released.
Yeah, no. But on day one, I mean, Miles can tell you, it was hard to get that record. I remember I sent Miles like 1 or 2 links in different cities and stuff to try to get that. Yeah. And I tried to buy 2, but I could only buy 1 and stuff. So you know, the day one.
I think the vinyl release was the #1 sale vinyl album on Record Store Day.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, come on, that's the most competitive day of the year to sell an album like this, and they did it. But in the original release, I mean, I don't want to belabor this too much, but It was mismarketed and misreleased. There's no
Yeah,
question about
yeah.
it. The crowdfunding on the website was a mess. The promotion in Target and all that other stuff was for Crystal Ball, which makes sense because that was the album. When you say something is a throw-in, we tucked it in with this other record, nobody's
Right.
going to think that's the big deal.
Right.
He didn't do these songs anywhere. And, you know, he was fond of, like, he'd go on whatever. Jay Leno would play a song you couldn't even buy. Like,
Yep.
he would do, you know, so that's something where, like, he didn't even do that for this record. This was not, and in fairness, again, like, I have to imagine this is one of the most stressful and hardest points of his entire life. So I'm not, you know, criticizing Prince or, like, why didn't you promote this record more? But I think it could, and also, like, the record label's in disarray. It's like the dregs of who's left after, you know, Clive bugs out and whatever.
Right.
So I think it's like the worst possible set of context in which to release something, and different from like the classic B-sides of the 80s were on, you know, on the back of records that everybody in the world knew.
Yeah.
Right. This was like on the back of a record that people also didn't know.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, it was sort of doomed to do poorly there. I actually think the vinyl release sort of reifies and strengthens the legacy of the record in a way that almost any other context would not have. It took it seriously in a way that it had not been you know, done before.
Yeah, I mean, it
You
was
know, I
also
think-
disc number 4.
Right.
A lot of music.
Four out of maybe 5.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, no.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, and I'm sure Prince wanted to sell records, but I think there was some records where Prince just had something to say, and I think Anil alluded to this before. It's interesting for me. I grouped The Truth with One Night Alone, the solo voice and piano CD, because they were sort of built around the same concept of a singular instrument being the focus, with some flourishings from synthesizers. They were also very limited and hard to find and release, and were not really intended for mass production or mass circulation. And I think that it's still sometimes challenging to think of Prince as, you know, as like an essayist, or, you know, someone who's like, I just got something to write and I've written it and now I'm moving on. You know, it's like the difference between, for people who in academia, like an academic versus trade press, right? Like there's there's a thing, like you have like your thoughts and your ideas and you get them out, and maybe they'll be cited by someone, but you don't really expect like mass sales. And I think The Truth was, you know, from I think I remember getting it like at Barnes and Noble, like the single, like the very first single was like a Barnes and Noble release, like around the time Emancipation came out.
That was Holy River backed with the acoustic version of Welcome to the Dawn.
Welcome to the Dawn. That's right.
That was the Barnes and Noble exclusive.
That's right. And I guess the single came through 1-800 New Funk with the religious iconography on it, right? So I don't, you know, it's like I didn't really. So that's the thing. You know, and it was funny. I think we talked about Animal Kingdom, and like this is like Prince. I just have something to say, right? And y'all do what y'all want with it.
Well, and also both those records came after, you know, his son passed and his father passed.
Right.
And,
yeah,
I
mean,
think
so
that's very connected to why these weren't things that he wanted to have off a billboard.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. You know, and he's going through a spiritually challenging time. You know, so I think that's why the album sort of gets lost. You know, I honestly, I haven't even opened my re-release yet. I bought it and I just haven't opened it because I'm like, maybe I don't need to. It was hard to get, but it was, you know. So I do think that its re-release on Record Store Day was the right thing. It gave it some kind of story that it didn't have. For people who are not hardcore fans, this is a completely unheard of new project, and you know, and so I think that that's a good thing. But it did, I think Anil pointed out, it did chart when it was re-released, which is as about as good you can get for what it is.
And it's ironic too, because I mean, The Truth is a very conversational album. Like, we're having a conversation around this album.
Sure.
If we had a conversation around, you know, New Power Soul, it would be it would be a very short conversation. Two, it would be very different. You know,
Wow.
but here we're talking
Very
about.
short.
But let's keep in mind, those are real close together. Like our
Yeah,
perceptions are
right,
very
right,
different,
right.
but
Yeah.
in his
Yeah.
career, they're back to back almost.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that C. Lee over in the chat actually says, for whatever reason, I group the truth with chaos and disorder. And I don't have a real reason for grouping them other than I like how they feel and say together. I thought that was an interesting comment. So
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah, I can too. So again, me like being like I'm gonna take take Arthur's title, being the music snob I am, being all about the music, is this record was primarily recorded at Paisley Park, and for whatever reason, the records that were recorded at Paisley Park either sounded too pristine, they didn't have a warmth to them, but I think this is the outlier. The truth is the outlier in that regard. And I'm wondering if that has to do with Hans, the engineer. I mean, did you guys get a sense of just the feel and the sound of the truth? Or maybe it's because it's acoustic and I don't know. It just feels, it sounds different from a lot of the other recordings from Paisley Park.
Well, if I may, I mean, it does sound very different. I didn't know it at the time, but that sort of the double A side, The Truth and Don't Play Me, were released earlier, and then it was
Like way early, like
the
a
larger
year
collection.
before.
Right.
Yeah, and now that I know that, I can't unhear it. It's like those the first two songs, really do have that warmth. I could see him, pick up his guitar, tell Hans to punch it and then leave. And then he does these two songs back to back,
Right.
and then puts the guitar down and then, goes away and then comes back later and finishes the rest of it. And I don't mean that as a criticism, but I do think that the first two songs, that was on his mind. He had to get that out. One take, probably, you know what I mean? And then the rest of it, he would kind of work on. Because after those two songs, starting from the track 3, we start to get more electronic, we start to get more elements, we get more people, that are involved.
He goes back to his habits.
Also.
I mean, that's what I hear. I mean,
that's a good point.
I think it sounds like the records of the era, the further you get into the record, except for the last two songs, the further you get into the record, the more and more it sounds like the rest of the materials from mid-90s. And clearly the first two songs were the anchor.
Right.
And it's such a different thing than all the rest of the sort of records. One is like a whole press story. He did a lot of interviews where he mentioned this record. And he said it's stripped down and it's just me, one take, and obviously there's overdubs, so like that it is what it is. But I think like he had sort of constructed the narrative around that. Every other album that had big hits, whatever, the title track, the signature track was the last song recorded.
Yeah.
And I mean not the title track, but the signature track. The first single was the last song recorded. So he would do that to bookend something, right? And this was instead like I started with the concept and I strayed from it over time. The other thing I remember is there was even at the time online a lot of hate for Kirky J and Kirk's influence on the music. They didn't like some of the beats he made on both Emancipation, and there were a lot of remixes that were done at that time, like all the sort of classic tracks. And I remember reading the liner notes of this that were online at the time, and Kirk did beats on a lot of these songs, like all the ones that have beats. And Prince had said offhand during the time, I don't remember what interview it was, but he said something like, sometimes I just have Kirk set a beat up for me, and then I go in and record. And I was just like, you do what now? Like you're the guy that made the Lindro popular, and you got Kirk J making beats for you. And the truth of it is, in retrospect, like all these years later, like you barely even notice it. Like it's not the point of the songs, and it doesn't. I don't think it harms the album at all.
Right.
But like the narrative around like what parts Prince did versus not, like my favorite parts of this are always where it's just him and the guitar.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think, there's only so much processing you can do to make a guitar sound plastic. Like, it's hard to make a guitar sound plastic. And so...
And that was the house sound of the time.
Yeah, the house sound, the beats sound tinny. There's not a lot of, size to the sound. There's not... The reverb is off.
They're
Even
default presets. I mean, they sound like they
everything sounds clipped. and small, and it sounds like you're recording in your closet. And but this, especially as you said, the first two songs, I mean, like even for The Truth, like starts off with this little vocal cue that you hear him make, right? Like just kind of the signal that the song is starting. And that, and again, that reminds me of like in One Night Alone, you can hear his feet stomping on the pedals of the piano, right? Like that is the kind of natural, a very naturalist kind of sound. And
it's stuff that he trimmed out of the other records.
Exactly,
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And so for me, that's why the more things got added to the tracks, the less attractive it became for me, right?
Right.
But I there was such hope, because I remember getting that The Truth CD single, which was The Truth and Don't Play Me, and I was like, oh, if there's an album sounding like this is going to be the bomb. And it was a good album, but I really would have wanted that to continue.
Yeah, 100%.
You know what, though, this is a very I'm just gonna say it, like one of the because we all love Dion, but like the warmth in Prince's voice in Dion for me is just so incredible. Like I even though it's not my favorite on the album, it's when you were talking about how crisp everything sounds, D'Angela, we talk about the crispness of the guitar, but I think the warmth and crispness of Prince's voice on Dion stands out to me, right? So for me, it's not simply about the instrumentation around the guitar, but I think Prince's voice, especially on a song like Dion, sounds fantastic, sounds phenomenal. And so, yeah, it might actually be something tied to Hans. And so, yeah, that's one of the things when you brought that up. I was like, yeah, it's so clean, it's so pristine, that for me, that's one of the things that I actually really appreciate about a song like Dion, right? Yeah.
But there's choices he makes. Like he clears his throat a couple times on the record.
Yeah.
And it's not the first time he's ever done that. We hear that in outtakes, but he never let it through. And so I think there's this sort of like he's performing intimacy, if that's the thing. You know what I mean? Like he's very he's very aware of what he's not taking out and what sound he's going to let it have.
Yeah.
Could I ask the group a question?
Sure, yeah, do it.
Do any of us think that during this period, The Truth being included in this period, that he was throwing meatballs against the wall just to see what would stick? Because we've got Emancipation, but we also have almost like these DIY projects, like the War cassette single and CD single that was released. That comes after. I'm not sure when it was recorded in the timeline, but that comes after The Truth. But The Truth, the first two we said came a year before the actual album, and then we get New Power Soul, which clearly is a Prince album, but he's not enabling a Prince album. And then we get
NYC Live.
Yeah. Because it's and it's almost like I really felt even then and now it's like because normally I would be up on whatever Prince was doing. Like I don't even know how I would like find out on a 56K modem at the time. But it's like I was finding out like late, like all this stuff is like coming out, and it's so disparate in theme and tone. And I mean The War, he's effectively preaching microchip in your neck, and then The Truth, he's intimate and quiet, and doing songs like One of Your Tears, and that was from me. And oh, he missed it.
Oh, you missed it.
And I couldn't really understand if he was trying to thread some kind of narrative together, because I was always used to him, threading these narratives together, and sometimes the books would change, meaning classic 80s period, and then he blows all that up, and then he comes with Diamonds and Pearls and goes through this era, and then blows all that up, and then now we have Emancipation. But there are these bumps in the road, and we get this one-off rave to the Joy Fantastic, and then now we're in a double-breasted suit, hair's cut, everybody's clean, and we're in Rainbow Children One Night Alone mode. And it's just it was almost like where is this going? And is this one singular individual trying to appeal to a multi, like multiple streams of his fan base. So I know that was a lot, but the question being that, did anybody ever have that sentiment like he was a little all over the place and was still trying to kind of like get his feet level in the world of independent releases?
I'm so sorry. I have to break though. We're gonna get back to your question, but the chat is just blowing up over this comma. And
You're welcome. Look what you started, Miles.
Why did we let this happen?
I have to shout out to Becky Haynes, and she wrote controversy.
It's not okay.
And another thing, Arthur, I want to say is that when you gave New Power Soul shade, there were a lot of New Power Soul lovers in the chat.
I mean, well, look, it's
if we didn't have that record, we wouldn't know that Prince's balls were round. So it's really important to right. Isn't that what the fans of the album really love it for?
Yeah. I mean, make no mistake.
It's the serpent.
Prince, Prince knew how to do his thing. Like, The One is on that album. The hidden track "Wasted Kisses" is on that album. But make no mistake. I mean, the shows that he was doing around that period. Larry Graham was there. Shaka Khan was there. Kirk was playing drums. He was missing beats. Prince was checking him on it. Everybody keep going. It wasn't a smooth presentation of things.
It was the first time he didn't have an era, right? So prior to that, he'd been like, I got a concept, right? This is the thing we hear from the folks, especially in the 80s, right? He would come up with a new haircut and wear a new color, and I knew it was time for a new record, right? We've heard that narrative a million times. And this is the look, this is the song, this is here's the title, here's the concept, right? Clearly, this is not that. I think no small part of it is his life is in an unprecedented disarray, right? Professionally, personally, everything-wise. I mean, I think about like when even, a couple of years prior, but he had done the AMAs and like he sort of ends up being like, everybody stop sweating the NPG's financial bankroll. And you're like, that's not like old Prince wouldn't be talking about like rumors and, whatever. And so I think this is this like, what am I now reckoning? And there is a period of, why don't I try this? Let me put some stuff out directly. Let me put this on a CD. Let me put it on a tape. I'm sure, I guarantee there's stuff that we don't know about that's like he guessed it on some record or he puts it down another way. He's clearly playing with it. And he had a structure until this point, which is like, I got my records and then I've got, this is a, protege, or this is something I'm going to disavow as me and pretend it's not me, like Matt House at the time or whatever, right? And I think the New Power Soul actually is a good example of like, I'm going to pretend this isn't me. Like, I'm on the front cover. My symbol's on the front cover. I'm doing all the promo. And it ain't me. Right? And that's like, okay, you're just trying to figure out. Yeah, you're just trying to figure out what this new world is, right? I think that's a real clear sign of like, I don't know how to, because he still wants to sell it through his label. And he still wants to distribute it through his new distribution channels that he's building. And I actually loved, I felt it was almost like a, they call it an ARG. There's these like alternate reality games, right, where you sort of like people are like, there's clues hidden everywhere, and you're going to go and find it. And like, Nine Inch Nails did one on purpose, like a couple years after this, but Prince accidentally did it. He's like, you're going to have clues hidden all over the internet about where to find my next record, and whoever is able to navigate through them is going to be able to find it. Now, he didn't set it up that way on purpose, but that was the net effect. And I think a lot of us that were sort of chasing that was part of the fun of it. Was like, I wonder if I'm going to get this record. I wonder if MPG, mail order is going to ship it to me. Like, I hope they do. That's all. I think that was all part of the fun of it, part of the chase. But the net result was nothing coherent. It wasn't like, this is this record and this is what it's about.
Yeah, I think the marketing and the whole marketing structure that infrastructure that he had been used to, that whole storytelling scaffolding, that even if he's the one originating the narrative, there would be people asking him questions. So like, do you want this? Do you want that? This is the look? And people would come to him with like a font, like, is this the font you see with this? Is this the look? What are the colors? Like he didn't have, he really had stripped down and had moved to a point where he was relying on himself. And this is this is the period where he is transforming from a corporate entity to an entrepreneur in a very real sense, with all of the growing pains of being an entrepreneur, which I don't know that he necessarily wanted to step into that role. I think he was just very happy being an artist. But by 2000, we really understand and see him getting a sense of what it means to run his own business, to run his own shop. And that's when we start getting the celebrations. That's when he does he releases the Rainbow Children, which in many ways is a sort of culmination of the messaging that had begun with the truth, right? Like the truth is the beginning of his encounters with the Jehovah's Witness faith. And he's still bringing with him. This is why he was never, a kind of true believer in the sense of a narrow person in terms of how he engaged faith, because he held those ideas about reincarnation all the way through, right? Like whether it's the Akashic records and all that kind of stuff. But the truth is the beginning really of his encounter. And I mean, I'm kind of glad EMI fell apart, because emancipation was built up as a corporate product, right? It had all of the trappings of a corporate marketing machine, Oprah Winfrey, the VH1, MTV, BET, simulcast, like everything. It was like, that train was rolling, right? And yes, he had personal tragedy, but also the record company folded, right? And then he really had to lean into his entrepreneurial instincts. And by 2000, we get it. We get it with the Rainbow Children. We get the One Night Alone tour, which is one of his best tours. We get it with the NPG Music Club. I mean, so the truth, I think, is really the beginning of that, and I get a sense that, I mean, because if I'm not mistaken, didn't he do some version of "Don't Play Me" at some award that he won, right? I
can tell this story real quick. So 2006, he won a Webby in 2003 for the MPG Music Club. And then 2006, the Webbies gave him a Lifetime Achievement Award, which I think they actually created in order to be able to give it to him. And now they've had it ever since, right? So this is an elevation. And I talked to folks that sort of run the Webbies. And one of the things to know is in the office that they have where they, organize the awards and do everything from, their conference room has Prince's acoustic guitar up on the wall that he smashed after it. And the reason why was they told him sort of like, we want you to come and get this award. And he said, can I play? And they're like, we don't even have a setup for a band to play or whatever. And he said, get me a guitar. And they went and they got this classic Prince story, right? So they go to Guitar Center and they go and they get him a guitar that he's never played before, never saw before. And it's just there on stage. And he does "Don't Play Me," and I think it's the only time he ever played it in front of any outside audience. He did it at Paisley for the celebration, and then he did like kind of a jam on it, one time for opening during the One Night Alone tour. But he goes out and he plays "Don't Play Me," and he smashes the guitar, and he's out, right? Like sort of classic Prince thing, like just walks off stage and out of their lives forever. And and they're just like, this is the greatest thing ever. We have a song he's never ever played before, and he just went on our live stream, whatever. They're still like, that's part of their whole mythology for the entire organization about what the Webbies are. And I just always was struck by that, because he went, and this was not a time when he was going to award shows. So like it meant something to him to be acknowledged in this other place. And the thing he said when he's being acknowledged, and it was primarily about his alternate distribution. Right, they were talking about him being early to the internet, whatever. Was he does the verse about "Don't Play Me" on the radio, right? Like like this is just such a like he's like, for this audience, I'm going to tell you. And what I loved about actually that whole period of his career, whether it was Coachella or whatever, was he was like, what you want to see of me in this context, I'm going to give you. So if you are this crowd, a festival crowd, you're going to hear Radiohead, right? And if you are the Webbies, you're going to hear me talking about I don't need the radio. And so I just think it's great, and I think it actually is one of those things where like he is part of the firmament of what that institution is. And the other thing he said, his acceptance speech, because he got 6 words, is everything you think is true. And that's on the wall at Paisley of his bedroom. That is like become, I think, one of the lasting slogans of his career. And I think the genesis moment of it is the truth,
Right.
and is his reckoning with the new way to connect with audiences.
So we actually have a question, and you're gonna have to. I'm getting old, and my eyesight is getting bad, so I'm gonna have to squint a little. But from Devin Parrish, and this is for anyone who wants to answer: is it fair to say this album was a lament? He was grieving the end and/or loss of several things at once: people, eras, personas. Who wants to take that?
I agree with that. I think it was a lament. I think that he shed his need to world build. I think Raven to the Joy Fantastic, that album in 1999, that was distributed through, I believe, Arista Records,
Yep.
was another attempt at kind of sort of gaining a platform. But we know that he quickly wheeled around and kind of went a little more organic with the Rainbow Children. And every other kind of presentation that he made thereafter wasn't attached to, new year, new you, new hair, new people, new clothes, new sound. So I do think that The Truth marked a period of where he kind of took stock of maybe what was important to him, that he knew that he could not build on, but I mean, I'll give you an example. So very unique thing about Prince, certain other artists are able to do that, but he doesn't need to release another record. He could tour in terms of revenue generation.
Right.
He could tour and sell out near immediately, regardless of the size of the venue. Few acts are actually able to do that. Radiohead is one that just immediately pops into mind. But he begins to release music that he wants to release without thinking about what's gonna be a hit on this record. Possibly Musicology, possibly 3121 might be the exceptions to that. But overall, I don't really think so. And I think even then, by that time, he did get the hang of running his own business, dealing with the minutia of how many orders were fulfilled, dealing with the minutia of customer service, and needing to, hire some sort of middle manager to go between the staff and, himself. So the truth is, I just really think it's a very, very, very important record, and one that you really have to engage with as the listener to get something out of it.
I think to the question of lament, it's the blues. That's what this record is, right? And in addition to joy and celebration and all the other things, that is about grief too, fundamentally. And so no surprise in a moment when he is really, I think, having his first adult grief, goes to the blues. Like, that's how he was raised. Why wouldn't he do that?
Yeah.
But it's not, it's blues is, how do you take pain and suffering and turn it not into defeat but defiance. And so
and that's
the truth,
this record,
the truth and Don't Play Me are defiant. Those are songs of defiance, right? In the face of loss, in the face of pain, in the face of suffering, there is that joy which is defiant. There is the sensuality which is defiant. There is the agency which is defiant. So it is a coming to terms with loss, but not in a way that results in defeat.
Yeah. Would y'all say this is his bluesiest record?
Maybe overtly, just because of the approach to it with the, the guitar in him.
Yeah.
I'd have to say that.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really interesting. I remember I'm a part of this group on Twitter, and I remember Kim last week asking if Condition of the Heart was blues. And it really made me kind of think about it. how just you traditionally you don't think of Prince as a blues artist, but his music is definitely blues infused throughout his entire catalog, in my opinion. And I'm just wondering if we're saying that because this is like it's based around the concept of an acoustic album, and like translating the acoustic guitar to blues, like are we just like defaulting to that as our answer because of that? Or because like if I think of like I consider the Question of You a blues. I don't know if
I feel like prior to this he had the one blues song per record, whether it was Temptation, whether it was Question of You, whether it was The Ride, whether it was I think, and they were all definitely really the blues, but it was kind of like it had that slot in the lineup. Like he definitely had a template for records. Like he felt he should have a section ballad, he should have a blues song, he should have the up-tempo dance number, like the opening kicker kind of thing. Like he was very
joy and repetition. No.
Yeah, I think
it is for me. Yes.
Yeah. So we have that, and they're all over different parts of his career. But I think we hadn't had that. The construction of the narrative of the whole record was grounded there or opened there, right? Like he would open with like the Killer Loud title track typically, and that sort of dramatic thing or something like that. And I think this was more threaded through the record instead of this filed in the blues spot of the record.
So I'm multitasking when I'm not supposed to. So we're getting, because I'm trying to get actually cue Krista up. I can just talk to Krista. We're all friends here. So we only have like 3 minutes left. And are there any closing words you guys really want to say about the truth before we end? Or have you said all that you want to say about the truth? I feel like Arthur has more to say.
I mean, it's a little quote unquote prophetic in the same way that Welcome to America is prophetic, where there's an album and thematically it seemingly foretells the future, but in the reality of things, that what's happening now in the future was actually happening then in real time as he was recording it, but it's beautiful that the album starts out with him asking a question to say, well, what if the things ever said turned out to be a lie? How will you know the truth? Right. And we've certainly faced with that concept today.
Right. That's the zeitgeist of right now.
But in reality, that's always kind of been the case. It just bubbles to the surface, I guess, once in a generation or once in every other generation, where we really have to kind of dig down and deal with what we feel comfortable with. Is that the truth? Or can we step out of that comfort zone and actually look at the reality of things and then deal with the truth of that? And I think that the latter, what I just said, is what Prince was speaking to, in 1990, late 6, early 7, to say that, what if and I think he's actually asking himself, as he's going through this kind of spiritual renegotiation. Because in some ways, when I hear the truth, particularly that song, but when I hear the truth, it's like I kind of hear echoes of the same spiritual platform that he did 10 years earlier on Love Sexy, where it wasn't specific, aside from Anesthesia, where he specifically refers to Jesus as an individual and a higher power, but he's talking about Love Sexy and this feeling, and this feeling of reality, and if you come to this, you will be enlightened. And I think he's renegotiating that thinking 10 years later, after going through this period of, nigga, bitch, ho, ho, all that. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. It's like, that's what he was doing 3 years earlier.
Right.
And even on NPG, it's, freaks on this side and get with this and get with that. And I'm not belittling the music or the themes. He doesn't have to be one individual all the way through. But what I am saying is that I think in a lot of ways he negotiates certain things on record.
This record has his last cursing on record.
Oh, wow.
Huh. Yeah.
Yeah, when he says it's shitty.
Yeah.
And Third Eye, that's the last time he ever curses on record. No trivia.
That's great trivia.
Although he does say "sick a duck" on the Rainbow Children, and we all know what he was talking about.
That could be anything. They got ducks behind Paisley Park. It could be anything. You don't know.
All right. Well, we have come to another fantastic roundtable. I really enjoyed myself. You know, we almost didn't have Miles Marshall Lewis on this panel, and we would have missed out on the comma. What would we have done? What would he have done? I don't know. But thank you.
I couldn't bow out for this one. I mean, I had plans, and I was like, no, but it's the truth. Like, I have things to say. This is a very significant record. It's one of my all-time favorites of his.
Miles, you sounded like you paused there. You sounded like you said, "I have, comma, things to say."
Yes, well.
Yes, well, so The Truth is a really, in my opinion, is like one of the best albums in Prince's catalog, and that's saying a lot because, as you know, Prince's catalog is vast.
Right.
And as I get older, and I'm going to be 51 in a couple of weeks on November 23rd, The Truth really speaks more and more to me. And it was already very high on my list of all of Prince's discography. But as I get older, it actually means a lot more to me. And now that he's also not here with us anymore, it also means a lot more to me as well, because I do think he is sort of bearing some truth. And, you know, like we lived with Prince for a long time with a lot of misinformation and, you know, kind of smoke and mirrors sometimes. Yeah. And there wasn't this sense of vulnerability that you get with this record. And not only do you get that through the songwriting, but also in terms of the delivery of the strip, you know, just being stripped down, which he returned to at the end of his career with the piano and the mic. So I just think this is a really important record. Every single person who's in Airmeet right now, I so appreciate you for actually understanding how incredible The Truth is. So my hats are off to you, and I want to give massive thanks to Zaire, to Anil, to Miles Marshall Lewis, to Elliot, and to Arthur for being on this panel with me and wanting to talk about The Truth, because I think it should be talked about. So thank you so much. And Krista, hit that button.